The aura slot is being deleted, but some of the auras are being moved into different parts of the game while others are deleted entirely. Now, for those unfamiliar with auras, it's a system and a slot in your equipment which allows you to activate different effects that last for an hour at the time. And once that hour is up, the aura will go on a 3 or more hour cooldown where you can't use the aura. Now, there are ways to get around this. Aura refreshes exist in the game that reset the cooldown so you can use it again instantly. Let's have a look at Jagex's plans so far. Road to Restoration Aura Overhaul. They start off by listing the problems with auras. First one being that acquiring auras is time-gated, requiring lots of real-life time to obtain. You can't speed this up in any way. Since players with a subscription to RuneScape only get a few amount of loyalty points every month, and you need a good amount of loyalty points to purchase the auras. Their timed nature and cooldowns place time locks and time pressure on you and your gameplay. So once you activate an aura, you feel pressured and locked into doing that 1 hour activity for the full hour. Now, some people might like that, some people don't. A big problem for me is that they are not earned through gameplay, so I agree with this one. They're direct buffs that don't need you to do anything in-game to earn them. Simply being a member will get you these over time. Most of the auras are miscellaneous buffs that don't actually add any real depth to your gameplay. There are a lot of them that simply increase your damage, for example. There are a handful that give some nice effects though, and they want to move those ones into the game through different methods of unlocking. And of course, the last one, they add extra systems to micromanage on top of everything else you already have to. There are also a handful of auras that you could consider DailyScape, which they are looking to mostly remove. We believe that you should be able to play at your own terms without feeling like you're losing out on precious time or having to wait for a cooldown to finish. And I like that idea. When I log into old school, I just do whatever I want. I don't feel like I need to interact for a certain amount of time. This is mainly a problem for optimizing your gameplay though, of course. If you want the best performance possible, you will only woodcut when your woodcutting aura is available to you, or only fish when your fishing aura is available to you. So if you go down the list of all the skills you're using auras for, you could be doing a lot of those every day, right? The meta around using skilling auras is really weird. Not to mention when the aura is on cooldown, you don't feel like you can do certain things. So how are they planning to resolve the issue? In the case of bossing, they want to remove that feeling of, oh, I don't have the aura yet, or oh, the aura is on cooldown so I can't do this boss right now. They want to create a new sense of accessibility for the content. We are, however, looking to maintain the most meaningful aura effects by placing them on other items or rewards in-game. Though they are being mindful, they don't want to create a sudden power creep through both skilling and combat. They say, in a world where effects are readily available instead of within a 1 hour window, we have to be conscious of introducing such power creep in. I don't entirely agree with this one, because while it might be true for the skilling auras, it was very easy for people who do bossing to upkeep their auras and keep them going constantly. So you could always have one aura that you wanted on at all times, pretty much. And then you could use your boss kill count currency to refresh your aura so it was instantly ready again. You could argue that their reasoning here, though, is more towards mid-game players rather than late game, because late game do have access easily to aura refreshes. So maybe the problem is more accessible power creep rather than power creep itself. They also want to be conscious of not creating more micromanagement. RuneScape already has issues with requiring lots of different items in your loadout simply to skill or do combat. We don't want to add more to that. We will be rebalancing the effects when transferring them to other items. So they might not be identical, but they will generally do the same thing. They give an example of 5-finger discount, which is the thieving aura. So that one would be turned into a 5% permanent success chance increase, which is lower than the top end of the auras, but it's not the lowest. So they've sort of squished the high and the low number into an average and then used that. With all this in mind, we've come up with some ways to transfer the most important effects to other places in the game. Some are existing rewards in-game, while other ideas are new rewards. We strongly believe in removing auras, but before we do, we want to open up the discussion to the community for proposals. So as always with these blogs, the ideas are not set in stone yet. They want feedback. You can leave that on Reddit or drop some comments below the video and let me know what you think of these changes as well. So, auras with effects they are planning to transfer to other places. Firstly, the Penance Aura. We'll pop over to Rainy in game so I can describe to you what the auras do as we go to. The Penance Aura lets you gain prayer points equal to 5% of any damage you receive. So you're gaining prayer points by taking damage. And while you can get the effect through Penance Powder in game, that item is quite expensive and Penance Aura is a lot more accessible. So they say transfer this to one of the below. Existing rewards are Penance Powder. The high-level item can be costly and also hard to maintain for Iron Men. I believe the upkeep cost of Penance Powder is 1.5 million an hour. You've got it through Penance Blood Essence, has a high requirement of the Vampire quest line. definitely could do with some quality of life. There is a reason nobody uses that. For one, the pocket slot is heavily contested with items. There's so many things that go in the pocket slot that are frankly better. And number two, blood essences are weird because they only have a chance of activating passively. You can activate them once a minute, but for their passive effect, it only has a chance of activating, so it's not consistent all the time, making the effect they have quite weak. And then finally, an idea of putting it on the Saradomin Book of Wisdom. Could replace the current effect, we need to consider page acquisition. I don't think this one would be very popular because that means that people would have to do clue scrolls, especially Iron Men, if they want this effect. And that locks the penance effect behind clue scroll RNG rewards. And I personally think that clue scrolls are good enough money as it is. We don't need to give clue scrolls even more methods of making more money. They're already really high money as it is. They also say there could be a new reward. Archaeology Relic, for example, could be made as a new relic reward as part of the upcoming Haven Heights dig site, useful for mid-level players, or another reward entirely. I'm hesitant to put it on the Archaeology Relic system as well because that is heavily full of useful buffs already. It's hard to pick and choose as it is. I also still feel there should be a combat and a skilling archaeology relic loadout, so you have one loadout for skilling and one for combat that can be both active at the same time. At the moment, you just have to keep swapping constantly, and putting the system onto relics would make this more micromanaging again, which is something they don't want to do with this change, so I don't think that's the way to go. Or really, I don't like any of the suggestions they have, because they'd either have to make Powder of Penance stronger, it would still cost a lot, like it doesn't change that. They could make Penance Blood Essence stronger, but that means you can no longer use the pocket slot for other things while using it. And this one would be a clue scroll reward and also still use the pocket slot, so it's still the same problem as the other one. If we move on, Vampirism Aura is the next one. The Vampirism Aura lets you gain life points equal to 5% of any damage you do, so it's life steal essentially. You heal as you do damage. They say this one could be moved to the Scrimshaw of Vampirism. This one comes from player-owned ports, could be tweaked to work on all styles instead of just melee. I don't really like that because now you're locking Vampirism behind a daily activity, which they decided not to remove. Player-owned ports is a daily. I can understand why they wouldn't want to remove player-owned ports because it has a lot of story in it. It's just that a lot of the rewards are daily locked, so you have to go there every day to check it out. There is no real way to change how that works because you're effectively sending ships out and then waiting real time for them to go out and come back again. So I'm glad that they didn't remove player-owned ports, but I don't want to give more reason for people to interact with that kind of content. And I mean, Scrimshaw Vampirism already comes from there, so if they reworked it to work on all styles, I imagine Scrimshaw Vampirism would also go up in price, plus that does lock this item into the pocket slot again. Not to mention, at the moment, you can use Scrimshaw Vampirism and the Aura of Vampirism at the same time, which gives you double lifesteal with melee. So if they don't buff the Scrimshaw Vampirism at the same time as implementing that effect to it, then it would just be a nerf. They would essentially just be removing the Aura at that point. You've got the Blood Essence again, which has the same problem as the Prayer one. It only has a chance of activating passively, so it could do with some quality of life, and it goes with the problem of staying in the pocket slot rather than having its own. And then again, you had the Zamorak God Book, which, same problem as the previous one, locks it behind Clue Scroll RNG, and is also in the pocket slot still. The main reason I'm against putting it in the pocket slot really is because you lose the effects of like these scriptures, for example, which are very popular in combat. They mainly increase your damage if you break it down to simple terms. You lose out on the stats, the prayer bonus. You're then gaining a sustain effect that you had access to before but no longer do at the cost of losing damage. So you're getting a nerf to your damage because of it being implemented into pocket slot, which, you know, isn't ideal. The Equilibrium Aura is being transferred. For this one, ability damage is increased by 12% but prevents critical striking. They're thinking either a new invention perk for this one or another new reward. Now, a while back, there was a perk called Equilibrium for invention, but it had its name changed to Eruptive, and the perk itself was simply changed to be a flat ability damage increase rather than increasing your damage at the cost of not having critical strikes anymore. It's a bit weird that they'd want to reintroduce that into Invention after removing it to begin with, but I'm also not super happy with that one. Frankly, I don't like them changing Invention perk metas anyway, because it always costs so much money to change around your perks. Plus, you're limited to a certain amount of perk slots as it is. So there's no telling if you'll actually be able to fit that perk into an armor. Plus, you'd then need new armor if you wanted a whole new set. The whole mess of a situation, really. Could also potentially end up leading to more switchscape, where you need multiple things to swap between. Not happy with that. So those are the only 3 combat effects they're planning on keeping around. All the other combat auras are just being removed. We then move on to skilling auras. Focused siphoning increases your chance of siphoning successfully within the rune span by 15%. They plan on buffing rune span success chance on nodes and creatures for this one. There's no other changes, they'll just increase the chance. Simply a balancing change, not require the players to obtain any new rewards. Sure-footed prevents you from failing obstacles if you are on an agility course. They plan to simply decrease failure chance on all agility courses. Simply a balancing change, not require players to unlock anything. Green Fingers prevents crops from becoming diseased and provides a 15% chance of increasing your crop yield when active. This one would become a new Dungeoneering scroll reward from the Dungeoneering reward shop. There are a couple skilling reward unlocks through the Dungeoneering reward shop already, but it's a little bit interesting that they decided to go with that one rather than implementing it into the Garden of Kareed. That already has a reward shop that ties into farming herbs. Frankly, that's the main spot where you would use the aura to begin with. I mean, it does have a lot of rewards as it is, but 5-finger discount increases your chance of thieving successfully by 15%. That one will be an unlock scroll from the Thieving Guild. The Enrichment Aura increases your chance of obtaining an enriched memory by 15% when doing divination. For that one, they just plan to buff divination success chance. They've already done that for the low-level divination in the early game rebalance, so they just do that for the rest of divination as well. Then we've got 4 auras they mention. Call of the Sea increases your chance of catching fish by 15%. Flame Proof reduces your chance of burning food by 15%. Lumberjack increases your chance of chopping wood by 15%. And Tracker increases your chance of successfully trapping a creature while hunting by 15%. These ones would replace Anachronia's Totem of Aura effect and rename it the Totem of the Skiller. I wonder why Quarrymaster wasn't part of that one. Quarrymaster increases your chance of critically hitting when mining by 10%. I think that change makes sense, but also they would have to rebalance the totem a little bit. Because if the totem is designed to be for skillers, it's weird to have a level 90 Slayer requirement on it, as the middle piece of the Totem of Auras is obtained randomly while killing Slayer creatures on Anachronia. Like, all of those are quite high combat level, and they do quite a lot of damage because they're creatures on Anachronia as well. So skillers, especially pure ones, might not have a good time with that. So the one piece being the agility course is fine, and the top one being finding Zygamites is also fine. There's also a thing to say about the totem needing quite high level requirements. I mean, you need 85 agility for 2 of the pieces. That's quite high. So the idea makes sense if you have maxed stats, but if you don't, you're making this one really difficult for people to unlock, especially since there was no requirement on these auras before, right? Other than waiting for your membership to tick over. It does make sense that they would want to remove the Totem of Auras and replace it with something else, though, rather than just deleting it. And then finally, the Daemonheim aura. They say the majority of the effects are already passive, so we just leave these be. The activation effects can be made into permanent buffs after some balancing. So what is the Dungeoneering one? These effects only work inside of Dungeoneering dungeons. Bones Buried restore 20 prayer points, 40 for Dragon and Frost Dragon bones. Then there's a whole bunch of passives. You get revived inside of dungeons once every day. Pure arrows are lost. Acts as a bone crusher, so buries your bones for you. Your backhand melee attack gets an overrided animation where you headbutt instead, and that's about it. And those are the auras that are being kept. Everything else is effectively being removed. We can go through the list here. For combat ones, we've got Reverence. That one slows down your prayer drain and increases your prayer restoration from potions by 10%. Corruption, Harmony, and Salvation do the same thing, I think. So they give you a glowing wing effect and a 2.5 increase to prayer experience. They also give you 10% more prayer point recovery when you gain 500 prayer XP. These 3 are quite popular to use for slaying Firewatch in Darkmire. There is a method there to get tons of experience. Now you can train your combat stats there, as well as fire making, prayer, farming, all at the same time. Seems a little bit overpowered, to be honest, so I kind of get why this one is being removed. That seems more like a balancing decision than anything else. Poison Purge causes poison to heal you instead of damage you. This aura was balanced a little bit weird too though. It was useful to use in Pyramid Plunder, they say. But if using the aura against Araxor or Gregorovic, any damage that is healed through this aura takes 1 minute off of the aura, so you could burn through the aura fast. It also didn't work on all forms of poison, for example living wyverns, or the poison during Zemregal and Vorkath. It also didn't heal you for King Black Dragon's poison, so there was a lot of weird cases where it wasn't activating. They say here, note, the following combat auras below are already planned to be disabled with Combat Modernization Update, as they directly impact player power with this update. Much of the value of these auras has been shifted to the player's default accessibility of power. Auras like Vampirism that don't affect player power will remain until being addressed with the aura overhaul update. So the following are being disabled when the combat update goes live in a week or so. Those include Knockout, increases hit chance by 30% if the target is below 15% health. Brawler increases your melee accuracy by 10%. Runic Accuracy increases your magic accuracy by 10%. Sharpshooter increases your range accuracy by 10%. Ancestor Spirits activates when you're injured. There's a 5% chance that your ancestors will arrive and injure your foe in retaliation. It was a sort of reflect feature. Berserker, Reckless, and Maniacal. Those would boost your damage accuracy and level by 10%, but coming at the cost of reducing your defense level and increasing the damage you take by 15%. The Dark Magic Aura, when attacking, you have a chance to inflict corruption on your opponent, which was just some extra damage being done to them. Regeneration would let you regenerate more health over time. Aegis would reduce all damage you took by 10%. The Majrat Aura increases the damage you do and increase your divination location cap by 5%. Inspiration would generate extra adrenaline for you, which isn't the problem because the combat update has increased the adrenaline you get for doing attacks, so they've already incorporated that into the new system. And Invigorate would allow you to keep some adrenaline when using ultimates. And so that's the combat ones that are being disabled. We can move on to the skilling ones that are planned to be removed later. Dedicated Slayer, giving you a 15% chance that your Slayer task count will not be reduced when you kill a Slayer target. Quarry Master would increase your critical strike chance when mining by 10%. Jack of Trades was a daily aura that would give you a lamp after you train 25 different skills within 3 hours. Wisdom increases all experience you gain by 2.5%. Illumination Aura is a daily one, increases all your experience by 10%. And the Resourceful Aura, when woodcutting or excavating, there's a 10% chance to not deplete the resource. When mining, there's a 2% chance to get a geode. And when mining red or crystal sandstone, there's a 10% chance to get double sandstone. It's weird that they're removing this one without replacing it with something, because this one had some use cases. Same for Quarry Master, because I think that one was used for the Gate of Elidinus skilling boss. Dwarven Instinct find magical chests of loot while skilling and killing monsters. Friend in Need summons Party Pete to help distract your foe. Festive increases your experience by 50%. Only works during December though. Oddball turns dwarf cannon ammo into odd things like beer, squids, and brains. So that one's very cosmetic. It doesn't actually do anything else. The Desert Pantheon Aura, which has a bunch of effects on it. Increases Menethos reputation, increases your life points by 25% for an hour, or up to 1,500. Gain 10% experience from all sources for an hour. Increases your divine location gathering limit by 100%, or set off a 10% pulse core effect for those around you and yourself. This aura is a little bit weird though, because you get 350 charges every day, and then you can use those on these different things that consume different amounts of the charge, and then it resets on the next day. Very much a DailyScape thing, as well as all other discontinued auras are also planned to be removed with no replacement. They say there's a handful of other content related to auras that they're also planning to change. If I head on over to War's Retreat, inside of War's store there is an Unlocks tab. This currently unlocks Vampirism, Dark Magic, Berserker, Reckless, and Maniacal. As auras will no longer exist, we're removing the Unlocks tab in War's Rare's shop. They're changing some achievements connected to that. Aura refreshes will also be removed from the game as they no longer have a purpose. Though don't worry, they're not removing that with the combat update. They're removing these things when the aura update goes out closer to summer. So you can buy aura refreshes as well in War's Wares, so they'll effectively be removing most of the consumable tab as well, meaning that there's not a whole lot to spend your marks of war on anymore. The aura slot will continue to exist in the wardrobe because it gives you the cosmetic effects like the glows and particles that you can add to yourself. They plan to rename that into visual effects. So what does this mean for loyalty points and the loyalty store? They basically say they don't have the answer to that question yet. So what I can say from this blog is it very much feels like they're removing pretty much everything, and there's a handful of stuff they're keeping around. I'd say I'm happy with the things they are keeping around. I think it's weird they're not keeping Quarrymaster, but everything else seems fine. What I'm not that happy with is their ideas for reintroducing them into the game. It feels like they're trying to squeeze it into something that already exists. The proposed suggestions they have for reintroducing the effects all come with the cost of not being able to use an effect you could previously with something else. All the proposed changes are effectively reductions to your own power and sustainability. So while I'm happy that they are doing the aura removal, I would like to see them implemented differently. But that's exactly why they're doing the blog now so many months in advance before the update, so they have the time to create a system that we are happy with. So what do people think of this? Generally happy, but there is a little bit of distaste towards it. I'd say some of the dislike is probably around the uncertainty of this blog. It doesn't feel like they entirely know what to do yet. And I feel like that's intentional, to get our opinions quite early so they have time to implement things properly. There are probably things I feel like they should have addressed more of, like for example this question. Outside of removing aura refreshes from War's Retreat, what are the plans for the store itself? Here's an idea to buy Reaper Task extensions. One says gizmos with extra chance to get better perks. Once you have the perks you want, it's kind of unnecessary. I agree the perking sucks, but I don't necessarily think that's the reward I would go with. This idea I do really like, purchasable lucky charms for elite dungeons. And no, it's not cereal. It has a chance to give you extra rare loot. Currently, you generally get those from the Dungeoneering store. Why is Quarrymaster not part of the skilling totem? Agree, when doing Crasis, you would want to just turn on your totem of skilling instead of having to figure out where to get the mining buff. Currently, there are more totems than you can have active, so if you have 3 totems active, you can't replace them every time you want to. You can activate 3 totems every week. So if you've already activated some, but you don't have skilling active, now you suddenly don't have access to the skilling buffs for a whole week. Now, generally speaking, I don't go and change my totems very often anyway, but it is the case that I do charge my totem every Wednesday, and any totem that I don't have access to, I'm just not going to do the content associated with that totem. Even if I wanted to, I would just be like, if I remember it next week, I might do it then, otherwise forget it. Also here, telling players they need 90 Slayer and 85 Agility to reduce their food burn chance by 5% seems kinda strange. The fact you can't reset Anachronia totems after you activate them is pretty annoying. Couldn't just add flame-proof effect to Chef's outfit. I do like the idea that Vampirism would come from either Havenheith or something vampire related. You could turn the remaining auras into aspect spells. Aspects are a relatively new term that sort of came about with necromancy, but there was one before that as well. Animate Dead started off as a simple spell that you could activate every 12 minutes. It's a mage tank spell that reduces your incoming damage depending on how many tank magic armor pieces you have on. It was very popular with the Crypt Bloom armor set when that was released. And frankly, it's still a very popular spell to use. The thing with aspects though is you can only have one aspect running at the same time, and they balanced that out when they released Darkness with Necromancy. Darkness provides a flat 20% chance of dodging the damage you would have taken. And while Animate Dead is very much tied to magic tank armor, Darkness works for all styles. There's also the aspect of Temporal Anomaly. That one gives you a chance to reset the cooldown of your magic abilities. Hit a similar problem to a lot of the other suggestions though, where you can no longer use, for example, Darkness with Vampirism. You'd have to pick one or the other. So a lot of people don't want it added to the Archaeology relic system. Relic system is the definition of micromanaging. Please don't add more relics to replace auras. I'd say this comment here sums up why there is dislikes on this blog post. Doesn't look good PVM wise. Arch relic or pocket slot was the answer to most things. A lot of people are wondering why Quarrymaster wasn't included in the skilling totem. On the topic of Vires, the Sun Spear could be updated to generate some prayer points with Vire kills, effectively functioning similar to the using the aura. Mod Breezy has taken a note of the feedback on Quarrymaster, aura, and gate. They say potentially removing Marks of War entirely and then tying the unlocks to boss kill count instead could be an idea if they don't have anything to replace to purchase in the shop. This person says they spent 3 bonds to buy the Majrat aura, so they would like a refund on that if that was removed, and that seems reasonable, to be honest, at least some kind of refund. There's a really cool suggestion to expand the War's Retreat area, but first the meme, of course. You take the aura slot, we get another pocket slot and another ring slot, and personally, I hate the layout because it's so heavy towards the right. Clearly massive power creep for something like that though. So here's the suggestion for a War's Retreat overhaul. Effectively implementing a talent tree similar to the Necromancy one for bossing upgrades. Now, connecting the left half of War's Retreat is something people have been wanting a long time, ever since it released, really. They've been wondering what's going to be placed over there. Introducing Shrine of War. Here you can build several new shrines with high upfront cost, but low to no upkeep. And they've effectively just given each shrine one of the auras. Shrine of Balance, Shrine of Life, and Shrine of Faith. So you've got the Equilibrium one, the Vampirism one, and the Penance one. Then potentially Shrine of Adrenaline, which gives you the Invigorate or Inspiration or a replacement. Though I don't necessarily feel like that one would be needed that much. And then the Shrine of Mobility reduces your mobility abilities, like Surge, Escape. Stacks with Mobile. So you get 5-second dives and surges. I feel like that's a little bit strong. I generally like the idea, though, of having a separate place for, say, these 3 effects that you could unlock through bossing, and then just having one active at a time, because I think having more than one of these active at a time would be a little bit too strong. You can effectively stack them already as it is if you have the Scrimshaw, Vampirism, and Penance Powder. But if you then have those 2, and then you also have these 2 shrines active, you would get double lifesteal and double prayer restore. So since you could only have one of the auras active, I feel like you should only be able to have one of the shrines active too. With that said, I'm not entirely sure how they would fill out a talent tree and what they would put in it. Really, they could just be shrines at War's Retreat that you unlock when you have a certain amount of boss kill count. For the talent tree, they say that you'd use Marks of War to upgrade it rather than the souls you use in Necromancy. A lot of people seem to like this idea. 95% upvote on that one, so that's really good. Please stop dumping effects into the pocket slot. A lot of people are saying to keep the aura slot, but just remove the duration of them and the cooldown, just let you activate one thing at a time. That doesn't necessarily address the problem of acquiring the auras though, does it? I mean, you could always introduce ways of acquiring them in-game, say that the Thieving Aura comes from the Thieving Guild. Would be nice if they upgraded the aura menu too, because that's a mess. Though if they're removing 90% of the auras, it feels a little bit weird to have 5 or 6 auras in its own slot that you can just use. Jagex just make Vampirism, Penance, or Equilibrium unlocked at War's Retreat, 1 active at a time. 86% on that one. They did make statues in Menafos to toggle various effects after Eclipse of the Heart. All 4 of those are permanently active though if you have them on, so if this was implemented in a similar way, you'd probably only want to have 1 active at a time for power reasons. Aura slot has a perfect use, the only problem was the acquisition of them and the cooldowns. I talked about the aura removal with a friend of mine a while ago, and he suggested that all of the skilling auras simply be just implemented as level unlocks throughout the skill's progression. So say the effects of the tier 1 fishing aura you unlock at level 10, tier 2 at maybe 30, tier 3 at 50 or 60, and then you just unlock better catch rates essentially throughout the fishing skill, rather than tying it to a totem in Anachronia that's locked behind 85 agility. I'm seeing that same suggestion here too from this person. Just work it into the leveling benefits to make their respectful skills actually feel more beneficial to level up. Vampirism could potentially just become a HP leveling benefit. I kind of like it more through a vampire reward though, it's just kind of thematic that way. But you know, I'm not against the idea of removing a lot of them. Like, a lot of them simply increase your damage, and just reintroducing that through the combat update is effectively the way to go. Make auras craftable through divination. Could potentially use divine energy to charge them. For example, the tier 1 thieving one would require 20 divination and 20 thieving. I mean, that's one way to tie divination into literally everything in game, but you might be putting way too much reliability on divination skill at that point. Like, the meta might become to just train divination before anything else. But as you can tell, they're not quite sure what to do yet. They're looking for feedback. Do drop that on Reddit or in the comments below. The aura update is not scheduled to come out until late spring or early summer, as you can see from the Road to Restoration roadmap. So while they're disabling a bunch of combat auras with the combat update, the skilling ones will remain until early summer, alongside some of the miscellaneous ones and a couple of the combat ones as well. Your aura refreshes are still staying in the game until early summer too, so you don't have to rush to use them, but I would use them sooner rather than later if you want to get through those. I do like that they're talking about this with us so early, like many months in advance, because it does give them time to implement the changes that we would like to see, in comparison to the outfit and cosmetics blog that was posted only 1 or 2 weeks before it was scheduled to launch, which didn't give them enough time to implement the things that players really wanted to see from it, and that made them realize players wanted them to put in more effort into restoring a lot of those outfits into a more modern graphical look. I'm excited to see how this develops over time. I'm very glad they are doing something with the aura system. And my personal favorite suggestion is adding more altars to War's Retreat that you can toggle one at a time. So subscribe and drop your thoughts below.